Welcome back to the Bees and Honey podcast. Today we're speaking with Vanessa Thill. She's the daughter of Philippe Thill, a sculptor and French artist who passed away in 2010. Vanessa is going to tell us a little bit about his work, about her relationship with him, and what she's working on right now to get the word out about this amazing French artist who in his time won several prestigious awards for his art. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this. What I love about Anchor is that it's given me creative control of my own material. I was approached by a big company to do a podcast about the art world, and I didn't want to sign over all rights to them. Anchor has allowed me to make this podcast and to keep creative control as well as financial control in terms of advertising. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free. You can use it on your phone or your computer. There are tools that help you to upload your recordings that you've done separately or on the app. They'll distribute it for you as well, which again, I couldn't wrap my mind around distribution, and they have it all there for you in one place: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and many more. You can easily make money from it as well. They help you advertise. As you can see right now, I'm getting my first ad out through Anchor. And all you have to do is download the app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Good luck with your podcast and getting your voice out there and owning your content. So today we're speaking with Vanessa Thill. She just clarified how her last name is pronounced. Originally, I heard it's from Belgium. Your name?
Yes, exactly. There are a lot of Tills in France, but I think they originated from the northern part of Europe, of France.
Okay, that's good to know. And your dad, tell us a little bit about your dad. Where was he born?
Okay, he was born in the south of France, or he was born in Lyon, so kind of central France. But his parents moved a lot. My grandmother apparently liked to move, so every year they'd be moving. But he grew up mainly in Marseille, and went to this kind of a charter school called Marseille Vert when he was a kid. So he learned to sew, to cook. Quite amazing for the time.
How old was he at that time? And we're speaking about Philippe Thill, who passed away in 2010.
He was in elementary school. I think it was from elementary school further up. His mother, so my grandmother, was also a painter, and my grandfather was an engineer, but he wrote poetry. So there was a bit of art already in there.
Yes. And what would you say was your dad's preferred method of art creation? I mean, I didn't know much of him when he was alive, but what I learned afterwards, it seemed mostly sculpture.
Yes, he went through the Beaux-Arts school, so he started in Marseille when he was 15, and then when he was 19, he transferred to the Beaux-Arts in Paris. I guess they thought he was, had a lot of talent and he should go to Paris. So he studied all different mediums, wood, all the different mediums they could learn at Beaux-Arts school. So he was able to work with everything, but his preferred medium at the end was resin, because you could do whatever you wanted with it. It's very light, it's water resistant, and it's translucent, so he would add pigment to it to give it whatever color he wanted, give it whatever shape. It needs to be done in a frame. How do you say?
In a mold, a cast.
He really, and apparently he was one of the first ones to use resin, and I know that the sculptor César went to see him to ask questions about that. He knew, I mean, they were friends.
Mm-hmm.
So he was well known for that, because it's hard to master. And he, in order to get these works, they didn't all. I mean, there were a lot of ones that didn't work out. So because of the temperature, it's quite delicate.
Tricky. Yes. So tell us again. I mean, I am looking at some of the works from 2000. How did he start off? Like, was he showing at a gallery? I mean, I know he won several prestigious prizes throughout his life, but what did you see as you were growing up? What was he doing? Where was he showing? Stuff like that.
Well, he wasn't showing much in galleries. He had a few shows and maybe city halls, like Ville d'Avray. I remember he had a big show there. Nemours, where he lived, so that was the southern part of Paris. But not at all in galleries. He didn't want to show in galleries.
Yeah, I remember that story you mentioned about him coming to Paris later on in his life, and you mentioned taking him to your friend Jean's gallery, and he was resistant.
Yes, I said, oh, okay, we're in the neighborhood, why don't we go and see my friend? He's like, okay, he's all for it. And then I mentioned the fact that he had a gallery, and oh my God, he was like, oh, no, I don't want to go. I was like, are you sure? Come on.
So what was his thing about galleries? Why didn't he want to engage with a gallery?
I guess he had bad experiences with galleries. I don't have much details on the specific experiences he had, but this is
Well, how did he manage to get his work out there? Like, how did he get the public commissions and stuff like that? How did people find out about him?
He had a lot of connections through architects, and I think that also came from the Beaux-Arts. So there was what was called the 1%, I think it was in the 80s, where the state would have commissions and buy works of art, and that was 1% of the total budget to have art in the streets.
Right.
Monumental art.
Yes.
So during that time, he had a lot of commissions, he also did some, for example, furniture for different businesses, or even private
clients. Yeah. So he was basically hired to design stuff for people.
Not only sculpture, but could be tables, a whole.
So tell us about the prizes that your dad won. What were these, and how did he feel about this institutional support since he wasn't so much into the gallery scene?
Well, he started truly being in the institution since he started with the Beaux-Arts school, and he won these prizes. So he won, when he was 22, he won the prize for the Biennale de Paris for sculpture, and then in 61 and 62 the Monumental Art Prize, and in 63 the Prix de Rome. And so that Prix de Rome allowed him to go and live in the Villa Medicis, Medici in Rome. And so he was there from 64 to 67.
Oh, wow.
And apparently he had a great time.
I can imagine.
I think he had a blast.
Yeah, that was like the height of things in Rome. Big stars, movies, all sorts of stuff.
So he had this racing car, and I think he was living a good life. Yeah. And the director of the villa was Balthus, the painter. So he was him, and also with his his daughter, or Frédéric. Anyway, so he had a good time, but after that, I don't know quite how or when. I know he totally separated from that art scene and kind of secluded himself from that. He chose to live, although even before he lived outside of Paris, so he had a big space, a huge atelier. So he had friends, coming by, but he was kind of secluded and not wanting to work with these big institutions. So it was a conscious choice.
Mm-hmm.
I guess he didn't believe in the political choices, and I know that for him art was very day-to-day, and it shouldn't be too institutional. It was meant to be useful, kind of maybe in a way like a craft idea of what art is.
Okay. Yeah, but also something lived, because he made it part of his daily life.
Mm-hmm. And yes, it was totally like surrounding him in the choice of the houses. He bought this huge house, like a castle, and for 20 years he worked on it, room by room.
Mm-hmm. And where was this?
In Nemours, in the 77, south of Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And the current owners who bought the house really fell in love with his work, so they kept it as is.
Okay.
So it's interesting to go and visit, because some of the doors are made out of resin, and his art is kind of everywhere intertwined in the property.
Oh wow, yeah, I really would like to see that at some point too. So your dad, he separated his works into the public and intimate works. Can you explain this to us?
Well, he lived from his commissions, the monumental art. He did a few, like the L'Arrosoir d'Alice, that is at in this castle in the northern part of France.
Mm-hmm.
So that he created himself, because this is a piece he wanted to show. It was also shown in Beirut, actually, in Lebanon.
That's the watering can?
Yeah, the watering can.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, the others were commissions.
Right.
So he decided to do his own art on the side, and they're painting-like sizes. So they're, some are fairly small, some are a bit larger. And he worked on that a lot, but didn't promote it that much. So when he passed away, we did a show called his intimate side, because this wasn't really known.
Yes.
And the reactions was quite amazing, because we showed it at Jean Tamer's gallery. I guess, I don't know if it was Art Corps at the time.
Probably, or Rue de Richelieu.
And so he had people coming by, and art dealers, and they were very impressed by his work.
Yes. And how did he work? I mean, I know he was working on both of these things at the same time, but did he go back and forth, or did he work on one thing and then?
Well, basically, he devoted his time, because he had a deadline for the monumental art pieces. So when he had one of those, he could spend months working on that.
Right.
And then whenever he had free time, then he would work on the rest. And he was, workaholic. So basically, he worked from Monday till Sunday, and there was no.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of sounds familiar. I guess you never choose your partners for no reason.
Yeah, exactly.
He's always a part of that.
Father figure.
So he was always working on his art. He didn't like to take vacation off, and it was from I don't know. He'd get up kind of early and work all day long until late at night.
Right.
So I would spend time in his atelier. I remember when I was a kid, I used to love to be around it, and I would smell the resin, see him work. So it's something I enjoyed.
And do you think that working with resin was a factor in his later illness?
Well, not really. I mean, it's not good for your health, but he got asbestos, and that comes from another material that was used in the 70s. So it wasn't directly derived from that.
Right, okay. And besides this exhibition that you did at Johan's Gallery in the first arrondissement, what else have you been working on with him since his passing?
Yeah, so when we so the way it happened was kind of interesting. I told him that my father passed away. He had no idea what his work was like. He knew he was an artist. He said, oh, just to be nice, really very supportive. He said, well, you can use my space and do a commemorative show of his work. So we did, and he was impressed by the work. And one of his friends, called Jérémy Planchon, was also, and they both decided to try and kind of promote his work. So we did a catalogue raisonné. I can't remember what year we did that.
Maybe 2012.
Yeah, and then we also did a show in Belgium, Brussels, and that was a very nice show. And since then, it's been kind of hard. I mean, everybody's busy, and just the art market is not too flourishing. So we've kind of put this aside.
Right. Well, at least in France, I mean, and I guess that's a good reason to let the public in other areas outside of France know about it. I mean, I heard there's this whole resurgence happening in Paris because of Brexit, but I think we still have to wait a little while to see how the effects truly are. So your dad died in 2010. Was he working up till that time, or how did it?
Yes, he decided to move from the huge house he had. He realized that it was too much work to keep it up, so he decided to sell the house and move back to the south of France, in the city where my stepmother was originally from, Cassis, not far from Marseille. So they bought this family property, and he built himself the house with a cousin and someone else who was helping, but he was really not that young anymore, and decided to make his own house as he wanted, a modern house.
Right.
So he did that, and then I think he kind of overdid it. And then had the cancer, but he was, still working on his art. But his atelier was small, so I know he had a hard time in that space.
Right, compared to what he was used to.
But until the end, he always worked, and that was the real problem towards the end, when he couldn't work anymore. What could he do? I mean, there was
really
nothing else
that
he liked doing,
and
nothing else that he
life.
knew. Apart from maybe he liked gardening before, but he didn't really take interest in that. So.
Well, that's why the idea of retirement is really just dumb. It's like you're retiring from what? Life?
For him, if he couldn't work, then I guess there was no really sense in going on anyway.
Yeah, I know a couple other people like that. I mean, they just have to work and keep active and be interested in their production until there's nothing else to do. Well, how would you say your father's own life and work influenced what you currently do with your own life? I mean, I'm not sure how the hula dancing and stuff is related, but what do you think about that? How is he influenced?
Well, for sure, hula came through my mother. That's for sure her heritage. She started a school when I was 12, 14 in Paris, and so that's all her heritage.
And your mom is from where?
It's from Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
So I'm very grateful for that. Even the music, my interest in music, I think stems from that. Maybe, I don't know if it could be an explanation, but when she was pregnant, she had to stay still, and so she listened to a lot of music. And so I think I heard a lot of music as I was in her belly and before I was born. So that part, performing arts, definitely come from my mother.
Yes.
But then what I did inherit from him is, of course, the love of art. But more so, I'd say it's a way of seeing life, and he was very driven, and like whatever he said, I mean, his word was very important. very integre person.
Yes, a man of integrity, yes.
Integrity, and that I think unconsciously I've always followed and really strove for. It was a real model. And also his the fact that he was very resourceful. He was amazingly resourceful. He would always find ways to go about, and he would, get stuff in the street and use whatever he had under right there. So I think I really have, I was very inspired by that.
Right.
That's what I try and do myself.
Mm-hmm.
And also,
what about that thing you said about working through difficulties, the D something?
Oh yeah, the French would say système D.
Uh-huh.
So I looked for a translation of this, and it doesn't really exist.
Right.
From being resourceful, which is not quite the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's like finding a plan B or a plan C or a plan D when you're in front of a problem.
Yes, so you can work through any difficulty.
Yeah, and adapting. There was something else. Anyway, he was a great inspiration to me, and it's often you don't realize how much you are, inspired, and you love people until they disappear, and then you're like, oh wow.
Yeah. And you were the only child with your mother with him?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to say, I remember one person asking, what is your the greatest piece of art you've made? And he would say, you.
Oh.
So it was like quite...
I totally understand. Yeah, I totally understand. I think if you've had a kid and you've made a beautiful kid and you have a great relationship with that kid, you realize just how powerful nature is in creating that work of art.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right.
So that would make my stepmother very jealous when he said that. But
yeah. Oh God. I hope she wasn't a cliche of the fairy tale stepmother.
Well, towards the end she was, but in the beginning she was
okay.
Yeah, she was. I enjoyed her before, but.
Well, death has a way of separating people, even when they did get along. It's very strange how that happens, but I've seen it myself.
Well, the money comes into the picture and everything changes.
Well, that's definitely part of it. That's definitely part of the division that's caused. But is there anything else you wanted to add? Like, what do you want to, now that you're here and you're probably going to move to New York, what would you like to do in the future with your dad's work? What would you like to see happen with the intimate works that he has left in your care? I guess your stepmother allowed you to have them.
We have 50-50, so she has half and I have half. Well, I'd like to promote his art, make it known to the public, especially in New York. It's a different vibe, a different public. And I think it could do well here. So maybe having it shown in big corporations or company, galleries, of course, would be great. We have to see what can be done from now on.
Right. All right. Well, I think with that we could probably end. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me about your dad. He sounds like a fascinating man. I wish I had had time to meet him as well, but perhaps in another lifetime. All right.
Well, thank you.
Yes, enjoy your time here in New York. Bye. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Bees and Honey podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to have you back here next week for a new and exciting episode of the Bees and Honey podcast. Have a great week.